Imagine being so poor that your entire family sleeps in one small room. Now imagine growing up to become the richest man in the world. Sounds like fiction. But for Andrew Carnegie, it was reality. The story begins long before towering skyscrapers, billion-dollar corporations, or Wall Street. It begins in a tiny stone cottage in Scotland, a place where hunger was common, where opportunity was almost non-existent, and where one young boy watched his family struggle just to survive another winter. No one, not his neighbors, not his teachers, not even the people who knew him best, could have imagined that this child would one day control an empire that produced more steel than entire nations. Even fewer could have predicted that after earning one of history's greatest fortunes, he would voluntarily give almost all of it away. But Andrew Carnegie's story isn't simply about becoming rich. It's about ambition, opportunity, failure, power, greed, and ultimately redemption. This is the story of the man who helped build modern America. Scotland, 1835. Andrew Carnegie was born on November 25, 1835, in Dunfermline, Scotland. At the time, Scotland was changing rapidly. For centuries, skilled craftsmen had earned respectable livelihoods weaving beautiful fabrics by hand. Andrew's father, William Carnegie, was one of those craftsmen. He worked long hours at a handloom, carefully creating fine linen cloth. It was difficult work, but it provided enough for a modest life. His mother, Margaret Morrison Carnegie, was equally hard-working. Unlike many women of her era, Margaret possessed an extraordinary determination. She refused to accept poverty as destiny. Whenever money became scarce, she found ways to earn more. She repaired shoes. She sold small household goods. She did whatever the family needed. That relentless work ethic would become one of Andrew's greatest lessons. A world turned upside down. Then something happened that changed everything. The Industrial Revolution arrived. Massive steam-powered textile factories began replacing independent hand weavers. Machines could produce cloth faster, cheaper, and in far greater quantities. Suddenly, skilled craftsmen like William Carnegie found themselves becoming obsolete. Customers disappeared. Orders stopped coming. Income vanished. It wasn't because William had become a worse weaver. Technology had simply made his profession nearly worthless. Today we'd call it automation. Back then, it felt like catastrophe. Andrew watched his father struggle every day. He watched a proud man slowly lose confidence. He watched bills pile up. He watched neighbors suffer exactly the same fate. Entire communities that had depended on traditional weaving collapsed almost overnight. The Carnegie family wasn't just poor. They were trapped. The boy who loved books. Despite the hardship, young Andrew possessed something that separated him from many children around him. An endless curiosity. He loved stories. History fascinated him. He listened carefully whenever adults discussed politics, economics, or the changing world. His grandfather often spoke passionately about justice and workers' rights. Those conversations planted important ideas inside Andrew's young mind. He began understanding that wealth, power, and opportunity were never distributed equally. Perhaps one day, he could change that. But first, his family had to survive. The impossible decision. By the late 1840s, conditions had become unbearable. Factories continued replacing skilled workers. Food prices rose. Jobs disappeared. Thousands of Scottish families faced a heartbreaking choice. Stay and slowly starve, or leave everything behind. Across the Atlantic Ocean, stories spread about America, a country overflowing with factories, railroads, land, jobs, possibilities. No guarantees, just possibilities. For William and Margaret Carnegie, the decision was agonizing. Leaving Scotland meant abandoning generations of family history, friends, neighbors, traditions, everything familiar. But staying meant watching their children grow up without hope. Eventually, they chose the unknown. It would become the single most important decision of Andrew Carnegie's life. Sailing toward hope. In 1848, 13-year-old Andrew boarded a crowded immigrant ship bound for America. The voyage was anything but luxurious. Passengers endured cramped conditions, limited food, stormy seas. Disease spread easily. Many became desperately seasick. Days blended into weeks. No one knew what waited on the other side. Some immigrants would find success. Many would not. For Andrew, however, the journey became more than an ocean crossing. It became a crossing between two different lives. On one side, poverty inherited. On the other, opportunity earned. Arriving in America. After weeks at sea, the family arrived in the United States. Eventually they settled near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. To modern Americans, Pittsburgh is known for sports teams and beautiful bridges. In the mid-1800s, it looked completely different. Smoke poured endlessly from factory chimneys. Iron mills roared day and night. The air smelled of coal. The rivers carried industrial waste. It was dirty, loud, dangerous. Yet to immigrants, it represented something priceless. Work. And where work existed, hope existed. Andrew quickly realized something important. America wasn't a land where success was handed to anyone. It was a place where extraordinary effort could sometimes produce extraordinary rewards. That idea would shape every decision he made for the rest of his life. Childhood ends overnight. There was one problem. The Carnegie family still had almost no money. Andrew couldn't spend years in school. His childhood ended almost immediately. Just 13 years old, he entered the workforce. His first job was brutal. He worked as a bobbin boy in a cotton factory. His responsibilities were simple. Replace empty spools with full ones. Again. 12 hours every day. 6 days every week. The factory was unbearably hot. The noise was deafening. The pay? Just $1.20 per week. For many children, that life would have crushed every dream. For Andrew Carnegie, it became motivation. Every exhausting shift taught him one lesson. He never wanted to spend his entire life working for someone else. He wanted to build something, own something, create something bigger than himself. He didn't know how. Not yet. But the dream had already begun. Throughout those difficult years, one person never stopped believing in Andrew. His mother. Margaret Carnegie constantly encouraged her son to think beyond survival. She reminded him that knowledge could open doors no amount of physical strength ever could. Whenever possible, Andrew borrowed books. He read late into the night. History, science, philosophy, biographies. Every page expanded his imagination. He wasn't simply educating himself. He was preparing for opportunities that hadn't appeared yet. Without realizing it, he was laying the foundation for one of history's greatest fortunes. The first door opens. Then, one ordinary day, a small opportunity appeared. A telegraph office needed a messenger boy. The pay was slightly better. More importantly, it offered something the factory never could. Exposure. Businessmen. Railroads. Executives. Ideas. Andrew immediately applied. He had no connections. No wealth. No influence. Only determination. He had absolutely no idea that accepting this seemingly insignificant job would change the course of American history forever. Because inside that telegraph office, Andrew Carnegie would meet the people, learn the skills, and discover the opportunities that would eventually make him the richest man on earth. And that is where our story truly begins. What if one small job, paying just a few dollars a week, could change the course of history? Imagine being 14 years old. You're poor. You've never owned anything valuable. Your family still struggles to pay rent. Every dollar you earn goes straight home. Then one ordinary morning, you walk into an office carrying messages for businessmen. You think you've found a slightly better job. What you don't realize is that you're actually walking into the greatest classroom of your life. Because inside that small telegraph office, Andrew Carnegie wouldn't just deliver messages. He would deliver himself into the center of America's Industrial Revolution. And within a few years, the poor immigrant boy from Scotland would become one of the most valuable young employees in Pennsylvania. A new beginning. The cotton factory had taught Andrew one important lesson. Hard work alone wasn't enough. He had watched grown men work 12-hour shifts for years and remain just as poor as when they started. If he wanted a different future, he needed different opportunities. Those opportunities arrived when he heard that the Ohio Telegraph Company was looking for a messenger boy. It wasn't glamorous. He would spend his days running across Pittsburgh, delivering telegrams to businesses and wealthy customers. But compared to the suffocating cotton factory, felt like freedom. Andrew rushed to apply. There were many boys competing for the position. Most hoped for better wages. Andrew hoped for something far more valuable. A chance. After speaking with the manager, he was hired. It was one of the greatest turning points of his life. The fastest boy in Pittsburgh. Most messenger boys simply delivered messages. Andrew studied them. Every day he memorized the city's streets. He learned shortcuts through crowded neighborhoods. He remembered which companies occupied which buildings. He recognized business owners by face. Soon, he no longer needed written directions. Whenever a telegram arrived, Andrew already knew exactly where it belonged. Other boys carried maps. Andrew carried the entire city inside his head. Businessmen began noticing. That Carnegie boy. He always arrives first. He never gets lost. He never wastes time. His reputation grew. For Andrew, speed wasn't just about working harder. It was about thinking smarter. That habit would later define every business he ever built. Learning without a teacher. Every telegram told a story. Railroads buying equipment. Banks approving loans. Factories placing enormous orders. Politicians communicating across states. Andrew couldn't ignore what he was seeing. While other messenger boys waited for their next assignment, he observed. He listened. He learned. The telegraph office became his university. He began recognizing the names of important businessmen. He noticed which industries were expanding. He learned how money flowed through America. Without realizing it, Andrew was receiving an education that no classroom could provide. The miracle machine. To modern audiences, it's difficult to appreciate how revolutionary the telegraph really was. Today, sending a text message takes seconds. In the 1850s, a message traveling hundreds of miles almost instantly seemed like magic. Businesses depended on it. Railroads depended on it. Governments depended on it. The telegraph wasn't simply another invention. It was the internet of the 19th century. And Andrew Carnegie stood at its center. Watching, learning, absorbing everything. An obsession begins. Most operators copied messages by reading printed tape. Andrew became fascinated by something else. He wanted to understand the sounds, the clicking, the rhythm, the strange musical language of Morse code. After work he stayed late. He listened carefully as experienced operators translated clicks into words. Dot, dash, pause, click, click, dash. Night after night, Andrew practiced. People laughed. You're only a messenger. You don't need to know that. But Andrew ignored them. He believed every new skill increased his value. Eventually, he accomplished something almost unbelievable. He learned to understand Morse code entirely by ear, without looking at the paper. At the time, very few operators in America possessed that ability. It made Andrew extraordinarily valuable, always one step ahead. Promotion came quickly. Andrew became a full telegraph operator. The pay increased. More importantly, people began trusting him with important communications. Accuracy mattered. One mistake could cost businesses thousands of dollars. Andrew rarely made mistakes. He developed another habit that separated him from everyone else. He arrived before work began. He stayed after everyone left. He asked questions constantly. Whenever he encountered someone smarter than himself, he treated them like a free teacher. Instead of feeling intimidated, he became curious. That curiosity became one of his greatest competitive advantages. The man who changed everything. One afternoon, a powerful railroad executive entered the office. His name was Thomas Alexander Scott. Most people simply called him Tom Scott. Scott worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. At the time, railroads weren't merely transportation companies. They were the largest businesses in America. They connected cities, moved armies, transported coal, iron, food, and people. Whoever controlled the railroads controlled commerce. Scott immediately noticed the young telegraph operator. Andrew handled messages calmly, worked quickly, never panicked. Most importantly, he thought before acting. Scott admired intelligence more than age. He began watching Carnegie closely. Eventually, he made an offer. Andrew Carnegie became his personal telegraph operator and assistant. Andrew accepted immediately. He had no idea. This single decision would eventually make him one of the richest men in history. A front-row seat to power. Working beside Tom Scott changed everything. For the first time, Andrew sat inside executive meetings. He watched million-dollar decisions unfold. He observed negotiations. He learned leadership. He studied finance. No university could have offered such an education. Scott believed responsibility built character. So he trusted Andrew with increasingly important work. Sometimes Andrew made decisions on Scott's behalf. Sometimes he supervised operations himself. Each success increased Scott's confidence. Each challenge increased Andrew's abilities. Years later, Carnegie would often say that finding the right mentor transformed his life. Tom Scott wasn't simply a boss. He became Andrew's greatest teacher. America's railroad boom. The 1850s were an extraordinary time. America was expanding westward. New towns appeared almost overnight. Factories demanded raw materials. Farmers needed faster transportation. Railroads became the nation's arteries. Every mile of new track created more business, more factories, more steel, more wealth. Andrew noticed something important. The people building the railroads weren't becoming rich simply because they worked hard. They became rich because they owned part of the business. That realization changed his entire philosophy. Working for wages could provide security. Ownership created wealth. It was a lesson he would never forget. His first investment. Tom Scott believed talented young men should invest. One day, he approached Andrew with an opportunity. A company manufacturing sleeping cars for railroads needed investors. Andrew wanted to participate desperately. There was only one problem. He had almost no savings. Most people would have walked away. Andrew didn't. He asked his mother for advice. Margaret believed in her son more than anyone else. She mortgaged the family home to raise the money. It was an enormous risk. If the investment failed, the family could lose everything. Andrew signed the papers. Weeks later, his first dividend check arrived. It wasn't enormous, but it changed his life forever. For the first time, money had earned money, without physical labor. Andrew later described that feeling as one of the happiest moments of his entire life. He finally understood the power of investing. Opportunity in chaos. Then America faced one of its greatest crises. In 1861, the Civil War erupted. Railroads suddenly became essential for transporting soldiers, weapons, food, and supplies. Tom Scott received enormous responsibility managing military transportation for the Union. Andrew became one of his closest assistants. The work was relentless. Broken tracks, train accidents, military emergencies. Thousands of lives depended on efficient railroads. Andrew learned how to solve problems under impossible pressure. Every crisis strengthened his confidence. Every challenge prepared him for larger responsibilities. While bullets flew across battlefields, Andrew Carnegie learned how great organizations function during chaos. Those lessons would later help him build one of the largest industrial empires the world had ever seen. A new vision. By the end of the Civil War, Andrew Carnegie was no longer the frightened immigrant boy who had arrived from Scotland. He had become an experienced businessman, a respected railroad executive, an investor. Most importantly, a visionary. He could see something others couldn't. America wasn't finished growing. It was only getting started. Every new railroad, every new bridge, every new city would require one essential material: steel. Lots of steel. Andrew didn't yet own a steel mill, but inside his mind, the blueprint was already forming. The opportunity of a lifetime was approaching, and Andrew Carnegie intended to seize it before anyone else. Closing. The poor messenger boy had become a trusted executive. The factory worker had become an investor. The immigrant child had earned the respect of America's most powerful businessmen. But his greatest achievement still lay ahead. Soon, Andrew Carnegie would make a decision so bold, that friends would call him reckless. Competitors would call him insane. History would call him a genius. Because in the next chapter, Andrew Carnegie won't just build a company. He'll build the steel empire that will reshape America forever.